On this episode of the podcast, we've got eSports mixing with motorsports. It's really, really cool as we're going to be bringing on the CEO of Racing Prodigy, which is a business that's set up to eliminate the financial barriers in motorsports to allow more opportunities for aspiring racers. So get ready for an insightful, jam-packed, full of knowledge type of interview where we're going to learn about the entire background of this business model and what to expect if you want to watch some of the races, if you want to become a racer yourself, and what the future looks like in this business as well. It's really, really cool for me because as someone who enjoys playing sports games like Madden, I have a respect for those who are utilizing gaming in the world of esports to actually help in the real world of that sport, like racing, right? So you're going to learn about that here. I want to give a shout out to all the sponsors of the podcast, those who have supported us. If you guys are an entrepreneur, you're a business owner yourself, similar to our guest here, and you would like to take your business to the next level, check the link in the description because the episode's being brought to you by ClickFunnels. ClickFunnels is an amazing software where you can build sales funnels and build your website through there to generate more leads and generate sales for your business. If you'd like to know more about ClickFunnels, hit me up. I have a lot of knowledge regarding the software, but you can also get it at a discounted price by clicking the link in the bio. Get your GTG discount for ClickFunnels. Again, really excited to bring this podcast episode to you guys today here on the podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe button on whichever podcast platform you're listening on. This is the Gametime Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Gametime Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's up, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast. Super excited to join you guys for another interview here on the show as we're closing out 2024. Massive shout out to everybody who's followed the podcast. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. We started this in 2017. We've gone consistently weekly doing episodes ever since, all the way up through now as we get rock and rolling into 2025. So thanks to everybody for joining me, whether you're a guest or if this is your first time listening to the show. Thank you for joining and being part of the journey. So it takes a village. I say that to everybody who's ever joined it, anyone who's ever shared the podcast, whatever. It takes a village to get to where we are. The show has now been downloaded on the audio front in 182 countries in all 50 states. We're still building out the YouTube side of things. So if you guys wouldn't mind giving us a quick follow over there. At the time of this recording, we're a little over 630 subscribers on YouTube, trying to build that out to the same following that we have on the audio front. So we got some work to do, but we just appreciate everybody for tuning in wherever you might be. So thanks so much for tuning into the show, guys. As you heard in the introduction, super special opportunity to kind of mix the world of esports with motorsports and esports with racing and whatnot. We're going to be talking to the CEO of Racing Prodigy. His name is David Cook. So, David, thanks for joining the show, man.
Shane, appreciate you having me.
Heck yeah. So, Racing Prodigy, when I was first contacted about your company, I wasn't familiar with the company, but I was intrigued immediately, David. Just kind of seeing how the gaming world, the esports world kind of combines with the motorsports world with what you guys have going on. So what I would love to do is just, if you wouldn't mind, David, giving us a brief introduction of who you are and how this Racing Prodigy business style came to be.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And again, appreciate the opportunity to share. So I come from Mazda Motorsports. I was with Mazda for 8 years. And when I started, I was fortunate to lead a lot of the parts of the division, the department, one of which was our annual shootout. So what Mazda does is each year we take the best grassroots racers, amateur racers. We put them in race cars. We run a track, bring coaches, judges, and we give them the opportunity to compete for a six-figure scholarship. Well, after Nissan learned of what that gaming could really help fix the access problem, Mazda quickly followed suit. So many know the Gran Turismo movie, but Mazda was also a car manufacturer that put gamers into real race cars. I oversaw that program for Mazda, oversaw the grassroots program, the professional series, parts department, and more. So loved working for Mazda, the opportunities we gave drivers in grassroots racing, in gaming, but ultimately left Mazda a couple years ago to co-found Racing Prodigy and build on what we were doing over in Mazda.
Wow. Okay, cool. So you do have quite a bit of an experience in this world already. So that's really cool. One of the things that intrigued me as I was looking at this whole rundown of your business model here at Racing Prodigy is the cost of motorsports. Now, before I even get into that question, we'll dive into the topic. I will say, like, in the last 8 years of doing the podcast, right, I've had a couple of different racers just on different industries. So I had Stingray Rob, he's an IndyCar racer. Like, just being in the kind of around the sport, the motorsports world in some capacity, I have an understanding myself of the money that's in it and the money that's required in order to compete in it, especially at a high level. I mean, talking sponsorships that are required. And, for some racers, it's like $10 million just to get through the whole entire season. And there's a lot that goes into it, but I also know the money that from a business side, like how much money's flowing through the industry itself. But I would love to talk about that with you because I know that's a big driving force for what you guys have going on. So do you mind talking about, the cost of pursuing a career in motorsports for those who are aspiring to be in this world? What is the cost to that?
Yeah, cost is the biggest hurdle. You might have the dream to race, but if you don't have the money, you don't even get started. I mean, just to get into a 3-day racing school, to step into a car for your first time, a race car for your first time, is circa $7,000. Nobody discovers you at that point. You don't get sponsors then. So then you've got to pay, that often or more for every single race weekend that you do. And you can't do one and think you're going to get picked up either. So a lot of the grassroots racers, the amateur racers, will spend $50,000 a year, and actually some of the best in the country, including go-karters, the ones that make it to IndyCar, which only gets more expensive, or Formula One, they could be spending in the six figures. And really, it's maybe not fair to say they are spending that. Their parents are
Right.
spending that when they were a kid, and they got to do that every single year. And then you get to pro racing, and of course, it's certainly six figures. And then it also becomes seven figures. In the end, most of the racers, or many of the racers that make it to the top level, spend anywhere between about 10 and 15 million, or 12 and 17 million dollars. I've heard a couple different figures from experts in the field, but based on what we know at Mazda and so forth, that's about right.
Holy cow. That's wild. That just gives a little perspective for those who are listening. Like, that's why I wanted to ask that question. It does give some perspective as to you got to pay to play the game, and there's really no guarantee there. And I think what I would say here to that point, David, it's similar to other sports too. Like, there are probably a ton of talented potential drivers, like potential racers, that just unfortunately couldn't afford to do it. So we miss out on a lot of opportunities to see some amazing people. I think that happens across a lot of sports across the board. There's a lot of people that we don't get to see because of one situation or another. And I think that's really cool. So would you mind talking about how you guys were able to bridge that gap and kind of like help assist in that field?
Yeah, and you really, if you're going to help, you really got to go all the way or don't bother. A lot of organizations will give discounts and give some support, but you can't cost cut to fix the $50,000, $100,000 entry, level. So the entry level is arguably the biggest problem. The only way that I think, and many of us think, we can really fix that is through gaming. You've got to lower the barriers to that of traditional stick and ball sports. It's got to be under a grand, and ideally under $500. Similar to, say, buying baseball bat, gloves, and or a glove, I should say, and shoes, cleats. But then, if you're a kid, you got to buy it again, maybe a couple years later, maybe another year or two after that, depending on how fast you're growing. And but in sim racing, to buy the wheel and the pedals, you could do that for $500, $750, and then that's good for a lot longer, and there's no travel costs. So the sim racing for wheel and pedal absolutely gets us to where we need to. And then even some of the gamers around the world, they can access from an iPhone, play a game, street kart racing, a mobile game. And actually, that's now a pathway to get in. So many people already have one. So then at that point, the barriers to entry are really just about zero.
Wow. I do love that. Now, I know there's going to be some questions, people who are listening to this that might be new to this whole entire industry, I should say. Maybe this is news to them, but there will be some hesitations, I'm sure, from people like, okay, so gaming, huh? Like, how does that actually? That's cool and all. Sounds cool, right? This I'm speaking on behalf of other people. They might have these hesitations. Oh, it sounds cool and all, but there's nothing like actually getting in a car and doing the thing. So, how is it actually helping them improve in that field? Do you mind maybe sharing some stories of some success stories that you guys have had with sim racing, and in comparison to like how that actually has helped drivers improve when they actually get into a car?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone in even our industry who's so close to this, had a lot of hesitations, 10 plus years ago when we at Mazda put, racers in or gamers in the race cars. Nissan had already proven that you could find, prodigies from gaming. If I may, just taking a step back, just look at the numbers. There are fewer than 1 million who race in real life. There's over a billion racing gamers.
Wow.
So there's got to be more prodigies, watching or playing games, watching the television, watching other people race, than actually racing on the TV. So the question is how do you discover them? And it was eye opening when we put back in 2014 at Mazda, we put gamers in. They were instantly the first session out as quick as our top racers. It was mind blowing, and so we started to ask. We knew they could be quick, but how are they this fast, this quickly? How does the skill set transfer? The confidence as well was a whole nother question mark of now they're in a real car. There's risk, there's danger. How do they respond to it? But they get more seat time, more practice than real racers. Some of these gamers are on maybe too much, but could be 10 hours a day. Some of the top racing gamers, sim racers, and the ability to get a car around a track. It's a different input if it's a mobile game or controller, but on wheel and pedal, it's simulated. The race cars are laser scanned in some of these games. The race tracks are laser scans to where every bump is reflected. It really is almost a one-to-one, transition, which is why they're so quick right away.
Wow. No, that's really cool. And I know this is going to sound kind of crazy, but as you're talking about it, I would use this comparison for those who might be used to this. Like for example, football. There's a game called Madden. All right. Madden's been going around for years, right? Since I was a little kid, played it on the Sega Genesis all the way through now. And what's funny is people used to, it's not real football. But I will tell you right now, my son, who's 8 years old, who's played Madden, for example, it has taught him concepts of the game. It's taught him how to understand defenses. He understands how to see the field. He understands routes and audibles. He actually understands how to go against a cover 2 defense versus a cover 3 and versus, zone to man. What's he doing on his blocking scheme? It actually helped him in his flag football as an 8-year-old, as dumb as that sounds, understanding how to see the field better. In fact, when he gets up to the line, he starts to like overthink it a little bit, but I can see to some degree like how a video game can actually help you as you implement it onto a physical side. Now, one question I had for you, David, as well, is the physical component to being a racer. It's one thing to know the track, it's understand, but when you're in a car, we've talked about like the physical necessities like hydrating and all the things that go on as you're having to focus for an extended period of time. Is there any way to simulate that, like the physical demands of being a racer through the simulation process?
Very little. There's force feedback on the wheel. So Gustavo Ariel from Brazil, one of our prodigies, number one on our draft board. His neck strength, his arm strength, his grip strength is considerable. He's on the wheel and pedal all the time. But outside of that, there's no G forces. So we brought in a team to identify where the weaknesses are, and then to help build a program to improve, those weaknesses and build on the strengths. Pit Fit Training is led by Jim Leo, works with a lot of the IndyCar, NASCAR drivers, William Byron, who's gamer to real life, won the Daytona 500. Scott Dixon, I think 7-time champion. I have to look that back up in IndyCar, but very, very successful. So Jim Leo trains these real world drivers. So he actually is our official human performance partner. So when we bring these gamers to the racetrack, Well, we don't just put them in the race cars to assess them. We put them in the gym. It's actually the first thing that we do before we put them in the race car. And Jim Leo and his team assesses them. And as long as they're in fine shape to get into the race car, we'll put them in. Now, as the race cars get faster, bigger, more G forces as the drivers climb the ladder, that effort that the racers will have to put in between Prodigy week, that tryouts I was just referencing, and ultimately running in a top level race car, it will be considerable for some of the drivers, but some of them are already in top shape.
Interesting. No, that's cool though. It's cool that you guys are already like thinking of that stuff though. Like as far as how can we best, I mean, it's not, you're not gonna be able to fix everybody's, like, it can't be a perfect solution, but it's pretty close, man. Like you guys are doing all the necessary steps to make that a pretty easy transition, as seamless as possible, I should say. As far as I was reading through the email, David, when I was first like learning about what you guys got going on, and the part of that was the Prodigy 3 Championship Series races making a historic debut. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind sharing some information on that.
Yeah, and to give context to that, so we hosted eSport tournaments with 4 different game publishers globally. So we had over 100,000 enter our first season, and then we awarded 32 golden tickets. We call them Prodigy passes because, well, we think we'll be discovering and are discovering prodigies. So we give them Prodigy passes. They're all expense paid trips to Atlanta. And then we bring them up to Atlanta Motorsports Park, where they do the physical fitness assessment. They do media training. We do car control training, data review. We put them in a road car on the track, and then we put them in the race cars for a couple of days and further assess. And we coach them. And Max Pappas, former F1 driver, mostly IndyCar, some in NASCAR. Boris Said, NASCAR. And other coaches help to train these drivers. Then they, some of them, 24 of them, got drafted in July before they got to this P3 championship, the Prodigy 3 championship, a real world racing series. So 24 got drafted inside Williams, the Formula One organizations, Formula One teams, their fan zone in July during the Silverstone Grand Prix. So 24 dreams came to reality. Williams was one of the 6 teams that drafted 4 drivers. So the Williams, through its eSport division, drafted 4. Thibaut Courtois, the goalkeeper for Real Madrid, joined as well. He drafted 4 drivers. G2 Esports, one of the world's biggest esport organizations, drafted 4. Guild Esports, backed by David Beckham and others, drafted 4. BMW's team drafted 4. BS Plus Competition, and then Sucker Punch, which is the fastest growing pickle company, drafted 4. So those 24 drivers plus fans saved 6 drivers. They all converged on to the racetrack in New Orleans last month, and that's where they went wheel to wheel. And then we actually start eliminations of drivers, which will continue throughout the season. But that's when 30 got their first opportunity to compete.
Wow, dude, it's so cool what you guys have put together, man. Like I'm taking notes while you're talking, and it's like, I don't know, I'm super intrigued by this. I am super intrigued by this. Now, I have a question for you, David. Have you yourself, having been with Mazda for so long, and then being in this right now as the CEO and co-founder of this company and this whole entire system, have you yourself, taken part in the racing itself and like been a racer on the simulation side?
I used to race in real life. I was very fortunate 20 years ago, but ran out of money and couldn't get enough sponsors to get to IndyCar. I never gamed, but then regret that. It would have helped undoubtedly based on what we've learned now. I didn't come from karting, so gaming would have been where I would have learned, like your 8-year-old son, a lot more on the strategy, and maybe I would have had a better shot. But I have gamed a little bit since. Certainly appreciate the challenges of sim racing and how much more talented the world's best are than I am. And I think that appreciation certainly has helped drive us to really try to fix this sport.
That's awesome, man. Out of the racers that you've been around, I apologize. My notifications keep going off while we're recording. I'm trying to like get those to stop. But out of the racers that you've been around with Racing Prodigy, you mentioned a couple, but who are some of the top ones and what makes them what makes a racer excel from a sim racer? Like, I guess like it sounds weird to say, right? Because to some people from the outside, they're like, well, it's a video game. And I was like, no, it's more than that. Like, what makes somebody excel as a sim racer to where they can, like, what are some of the best practices you've seen from the elite racers where they can transition easier over to the real track?
Well, it's the attributes that we've studied, and when we do assess these gamers, the world's best at Prodigy Week, and then again in NOLA, it's very similar to the best real world drivers that we've encountered. A lot of it is cognitive. It's there's obviously a physical aspect to it. There's muscle memory, there's knowledge, there's more, but the world's best racers all seem to be very analytical, composed. They keep their emotions in check, very focused, very driven. The elite athletes want this more than anything. There's not a plan B to this. We haven't yet identified what it is, but there's this it factor that when they just walk in the room and you speak with them for just even a few seconds, you can quickly identify, at least we believe we can, that this kid or this adult may have it. But they all just have the same kind of swagger, the same confidence. And any of the world's best sim racers, their work ethic is considerable. That drive, that determination, that knowledge is way higher than almost any other racer, particularly any amateur racer.
Interesting. I love that you said they have the it factor. You're still trying to figure what like it is, but when it comes to work ethic, how often should these racers be racing? Like, do they have to wait for an event, or do you guys have it set up to where they can pull up the game and just do it whenever they want to, I guess?
Well, they can pull up a game and compete in almost any of them at any time. I mean, there's a billion racing gamers out there, and so there's plenty of opportunity to join, to learn, and to improve. And there's coaching resources and more. We though host esport tournaments approximately 9 months out of the year. So we're in now our season two. We kicked it off in September. So we had our first six Prodigy Pass winners just win their tickets to Atlanta as of this past weekends. So there's tournaments going on from September or now all the way through March to win a golden ticket. Come to Prodigy Week, and then we'll kick up season three next summer.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. So if somebody's interested though, David, in this, to like, they're like, they want to take part in it, they might hear that like you're in the middle of a season, you've got this and this and this, but like, how do they actually get into the system? Like where it's like, do they talk to you? Do they sign up on a thing? Do they get put on a waiting list? Do they have to actually be approved, right? Do they have to qualify to be part of Racing Project? I guess that's where I'm confused that like, I know there's a process to get them in there, but is there a filter down the line somewhere?
Yeah, not much of a filter to get your shot at this. You could go to racingprodigy.com and you could sign up with us, and then you got to choose which game you want to participate in. Williams through the eSport division is hosting some tournaments for us, and will on several different games. The one that we've done the most golden tickets, Prodigy passes through, is a game, a simulation called iRacing. So you could go to iRacing.com. Now, you could play with a keyboard. You're not going to win. You really do need a wheel and pedal. So then there's a barrier. There's a knowledge and financial barrier there. Again, similar to other traditional sports. The fastest, easiest way to get going immediately and is again, pick up the iPhone or iPad or another iOS device, and you could download the Street Kart racing game, KART, Street Kart Racing. It's a mobile game, and we had several winners from our first season enter, and actually the second highest on our draft board, Lawrence Beerton out of Belgium. He's probably a prodigy. He won on the mobile game. He was a first round draft pick, He's on Team Guild, on Guild eSports Prodigy team. Catherine Legg is his coach. She's an Indy car driver, mostly known probably for the Indy 500 last couple years. And she's coaching Lawrence Beerton. But he's a prodigy. He will climb the ladder and has a great future. And he was the world's fastest on street car. Now that he's off street cart, there's a new world fastest.
Man, so cool, dude. This is awesome. Where can we find information about this? I know we've got the website, we've got social media channels. Where are you guys most active though, David, as far as like content so that people can become more and more familiar with this?
Well, Racing Prodigy's website, racingprodigy.com, is not a bad place to look. We have more regular information where we celebrate the drivers. We share all the updates on how the competitions are going, how everybody is doing. We share more entertaining and educational content, often on Instagram. So the Racing Prodigy Instagram page. YouTube is a place where we stream some of the sim races, all but the mobile games. Can't stream the mobile game, but all the other tournaments that we have, we stream it on our YouTube channel, and then we put some other content on the YouTube channel as well, some on Facebook and the other social media platforms as well.
Wow. Okay. So the YouTube side, I would encourage those who are listening, if you want to get a view of it, I've actually seen a couple things there. If you want to see what it's like, the actual events and so forth, check that out. So the YouTube side there, I'll make sure to link all that here in the description too, but that's super, super helpful. But I do want to make sure that people understand, if you want to go watch kind of how this is done and see, now you've heard David talk about it. If you want to go see it in person, just kind of see what it looks like. YouTube's a good resource for that. Now, David, as I'm talking to you and as I studied up on some of your stuff, understanding your history and then what you're doing here on the business front as a business owner and doing all the stuff, what would you say, from being a former racer and then being involved with Mazda and then being here, what is the biggest life lesson that racing has taught you, David Cook?
The biggest life lesson I would say the racing has taught is on the networking and building relationships. If you don't build relationships, it's hard to get far in life. I suppose business or personal. It's on the business side. I think most of your viewers, I'm sure, know this, but it's how you open doors. It's hard to otherwise. It's how you get certain people to rally behind a vision. We could talk about this, but how would we have gotten Catherine Legg and Boris Ed and Max Pappas and Williams, Thibaut Courtois? We're not cold calling. All of it is relationships. Every single one of these are relationships and networking. And if you don't do that as a race car driver, forget the business side for a moment, then you're not going to get anywhere either, because companies aren't taking young racers' phone calls to do sponsorship at a grassroots or entry level, series, including entry level professional series, which again is 6 figures, 5 figures or 6 figures at the amateur level, but there's not a lot of value. So it really has to be relationships to where you can have the conversation, try to figure out how to come to a mutually beneficial outcome. And you gotta have those relationships. So that would be the biggest thing.
So awesome, man. That's awesome. I would encourage anybody who's listening to take notes on that too. If you're an aspiring racer, understand the importance of it. Like the networking and the relationship factor is a huge piece of that. Like that's so important. And I think it gets overlooked sometimes because you're looking at the intricacies of the sport itself. You don't really think about that, but that's a huge piece of it. And another question I have for you, David, as far as being the CEO, like if you were to look 3 to 5 years down the road from now with Racing Prodigy, where should we expect to see that in 3 to 5 years from now?
You asked about the Prodigy 3 championship, and what I should have added is that while our first race event was at NOLA, we have 8 more rounds in our first season to go, but it doesn't end with the P3 championship. And then, it's not a best wishes to those racers and hope somebody picks you up, because you still generally at this level have to bring money. And again, it's tough to get someone to write a check, but that's the name of the game. And motorsport is getting somebody to write you a check. So for us, it's how do we take that requirement out of the picture here and create a program that gives the racers who do have the talent, the work ethic, the opportunity to really pursue the dream in a sustainable way. That was the problem with the Mazda program, the Nissan program, and McLaren did it after Mazda, where you took gamers and plugged them into to motorsport, essentially a broken business model where cost exceeds value. For us, we're trying to have, of course, value exceed cost. Easier said than done. But P3 is named appropriately. We want a P2 championship and a P1 series championship as well. Just like F1 is Formula One, F2 is below it, and F3 below it. And a ladder program, Williams will share. You can't just take a gamer and put him in an F1 car. Well, we can't take a gamer and put him in the P1 car either. So in 3 to 5 years, we at that point will have the P2 championship and we'll have the P1 championship. We anticipate a docuseries coming out in about 11 months following the stories of these racers. We just signed with MAV TV for our first season to cover the real world racing, the P3 championship. So that begins in February. We have a lot of work to do on the social media side, but we just hired a social media manager 4 months ago to really start to rock and roll on this. So 3 to 5 years, we accomplished P3, P2, P1, the docuseries, the race broadcast, and much more social. Our goal is to reach the broader audience, is that the kids down my street, down your street, all over the world, the families all end up hearing about a gaming to real life motorsport league where you could win in a video game. You could get a golden ticket. You could come to Prodigy Week. That's our real world tryouts. You could potentially be drafted by Williams eSports division to race in real life, Thibaut Courtois and others I mentioned, and then get a paid racing contract from us and get into the docuseries, get on television and pursue your dream, and then avoid elimination, because we do eliminate some drivers. The majority will move up to P2, but the goal is to have those kids and those families around the world all aware of the world's first E2Real sports league.
Wow, man. I love that you have an entire business plan because you guys have already seen the success and you're building upon that. That's awesome. That's going to be so cool to watch. And I'm for one looking forward to seeing this from now on. Now that I'm kind of more involved with this on this perspective, I'm going to be paying attention to it and seeing what's going on. I would love to potentially have a racer join the show and just kind of talk about their experience from the perspective of a racer and kind of share their knowledge. Because I think this is one of those things that this is where the world's headed to. Like this is you're kind of ahead of the time, but good timing, because I think this is what's needed and where it's headed. So I think it's going to be really, really cool to watch and see the growth. Was there anything else, David, that you had to share that you would like to share before we sign off for the podcast?
Maybe talk about the racers for just a moment.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being willing to maybe take one on or however you'd like to do that. But we have a couple ladies that are in a man's sport, competing in a man's sport. It's not easy for them. Certainly trying to fix that as well. We are the most diverse racing series, at least from what we could tell as of now, in motorsport in the world. You lower the barriers, increase the incentives, and that's kind of a byproduct of the system. Many from humble beginnings. One of our racers from Austria is 15, drives his dad's tractor, on the family farm. And all he wants to do is be a race car driver. We have 3 who are special needs that are brilliantly talented, but don't have the B2B, the networking skill set, the pocketbook to pay to race and to open up those doors. So it would be wonderful to introduce you to any and all of our drivers and be able to share some of these stories of opening motorsports to all, regardless of socioeconomic background, regardless of the pocketbook.
So cool. Yes. Let's stay in contact if we could, please, because I would be honored to have them on here. I think this is awesome. I love highlighting stuff like this. Whole point of this show is to deliver a panoramic view on sports, seeing it from all angles. And when people are innovative like yourself and your entire team to build something like this is the type of stuff I want to be involved with and just being able to highlight on the platform. So that will be super, super cool. And I just want to say thank you, David, for joining me and being willing to share your story, share the story behind this whole entire business model, I'm looking forward to seeing the growth of it. And I'm just grateful. So I just want to say thank you first and foremost for being willing to join me, man.
I'm grateful too, and our whole team is, and really appreciate the support of what we're trying to accomplish here. So it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. And for all those who are listening, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Again, just make sure to hit that follow button on whichever platform you're listening to. And remember, we'll be coming to you guys next week with another interview. Take care. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.